In the mid-1990s, Michael Jackson released a song so aggressive, so unapologetic, that it openly challenged governments, police, and the media itself. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't radio-friendly, and it definitely wasn't comfortable for television. When They Don't Care About Us premiered, many fans believed MTV crossed a line. Some even swore the network cut the video right in the middle of airing it. But what actually happened behind the scenes was more calculated, more quiet, and arguably more revealing about how powerful media really works. Because MTV didn't just react to the song, they restricted it, and the reasons why still spark debate decades later. The myth versus what people thought they saw. By the spring of 1996, Michael Jackson was no longer just a pop star releasing chart-friendly singles. He was in the middle of what many consider the most confrontational era of his career. On April 8, 1996, They Don't Care About Us was released in the UK, followed shortly by its US release on April 23, 1996, as the fourth single from History, Past, Present, and Future, Book 1. From the very beginning, the song carried a reputation. This wasn't Billie Jean. This wasn't black or white. This was a direct attack on systems of power. Almost immediately, rumors began circulating among fans and media watchers. Some claimed that when MTV first aired the video, it was abruptly cut short. Others insisted the network pulled it without explanation. Over time, the story evolved into something more dramatic, the idea that MTV had outright censored Michael Jackson live on air. But here's where things get interesting. There is no verified broadcast record showing MTV stopping the video mid-premiere, no emergency cutoff, no on-air apology. What actually happened was far quieter and far more strategic. In 1996, MTV was still one of the most powerful cultural gatekeepers in the world. A song's success, especially in the United States, often depended on whether MTV placed it in heavy daytime rotation, and They Don't Care About Us immediately put the network in a difficult position. The lyrics referenced brutality, discrimination, and institutional neglect. The visuals, depending on which version you saw, were even more confrontational. This wasn't a song that fit neatly between pop hits and spring break countdowns, so instead of a dramatic ban, MTV took a different approach. The song wasn't embraced the way Jackson's previous releases had been. Airplay became limited. Certain versions were favored over others. And crucially, the most unsettling imagery was kept away from mainstream audiences. To many viewers, it felt like the song had simply vanished, and that disappearance is where the myth began. And once you understand what Michael Jackson was trying to say with this song, MTV's discomfort starts to make a lot more sense. By the time They Don't Care About Us was written and recorded in 1994 and 1995, Michael Jackson was living under an intensity of scrutiny unlike anything earlier in his career. He was no longer just responding to tabloids. He was responding to institutions. The song was created during sessions at Hit Factory Studios in New York City and A&M Studios in Los Angeles, with Jackson listed as the sole songwriter. That detail matters because this wasn't shaped by a committee or softened by collaborators. This was Michael speaking directly. Musically, the track was built around militaristic drums, chanting vocals, and an almost confrontational rhythm. Lyrically, Jackson called out police brutality, racial profiling, prison systems, and government indifference. Lines referenced being beaten, targeted, and silenced. Themes rarely heard from an artist of his stature in the mid-1990s. At a time when MTV thrived on glossy visuals and escapism, this song felt like an accusation aimed straight at the system that helped elevate pop stars in the first place. This was also the H.I. Story era, when Jackson openly framed himself as misunderstood and mistreated by the press. The album's very title was a statement, and They Don't Care About Us wasn't hidden as a deep cut. It was chosen as a single. That decision alone forced MTV, radio programmers, and advertisers to confront a message they weren't used to handling from someone with Jackson's global reach. For longtime fans, this shift was shocking. For critics, it was uncomfortable. And for networks like MTV, it was risky. Playing this song meant aligning, even indirectly, with a message about systemic abuse and media complicity. And that's exactly why its rollout became so careful. If you're finding this breakdown helpful so far, make sure you're subscribed, because what happened next, especially once the visuals entered the picture, is where the situation truly escalated. 2 videos, 2 messages, and a very clear divide. To fully understand why MTV reacted the way it did, you have to look at the visuals Michael Jackson chose to attach to "They Don't Care About Us." Instead of creating one safe, universally acceptable music video, Jackson made 2 completely different versions, both directed by Spike Lee, and each sent a very different message. The first video was filmed in February 1996 in Brazil, primarily in Pelourinho, Salvador, and later in the Santa Marta favela in Rio de Janeiro. Jackson performed alongside the Afro-Brazilian percussion group Olodum, surrounded by massive crowds of local residents. The imagery was loud, energetic, and celebratory, but it also highlighted poverty and marginalization. Brazilian officials were reportedly uneasy, especially as Rio was campaigning to host the 2004 Olympic Games, fearing the video would spotlight social inequality on a global stage. Despite that tension, this version felt vibrant enough for television. This is the version MTV leaned on, but the second video was something else entirely. The prison version, shot in a controlled studio environment in New York, stripped away color and celebration. Jackson appeared in a prison uniform, surrounded by inmates, guards, barbed wire, and stark concrete walls. Intercut throughout were real archival images: police beatings, violent crackdowns on protesters, scenes of war, footage linked to apartheid, the Ku Klux Klan, and the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. There was no metaphor here. The message was blunt and deeply unsettling. This wasn't just a music video, it was a political statement set to music. And while Spike Lee has since described it as one of the most powerful things they ever created together, it posed a serious problem for mainstream television. Airing it meant confronting real violence, real injustice, and real institutions, not fictional villains. MTV now had a choice, and the version they quietly pushed aside says everything about why this song became so restricted. What MTV actually did behind the scenes. By the time They Don't Care About Us reached American television in 1996, MTV executives were already walking a tightrope. Michael Jackson was still one of the network's most valuable artists, but this release didn't come with the usual flexibility. The prison version of the video, with its unfiltered footage of real-world violence and oppression, immediately raised red flags. According to multiple reports over the years, MTV deemed the video too graphic and too politically charged for regular daytime rotation. So instead of issuing a public ban, MTV made a quieter move. The network limited airplay, favoring the Brazil version almost exclusively. The prison version, when it aired at all, was pushed into late-night slots, typically after 9 p.m., where fewer viewers would see it. This approach allowed MTV to say the video wasn't censored, while still keeping its most confrontational imagery away from mainstream audiences. At the same time, the audio itself was altered for broadcast. Certain lyric lines that had already sparked backlash were muted or replaced in MTV's on-air version. This wasn't unusual for the network, but the combination of edited lyrics, restricted scheduling, and selective video choice made the song feel strangely absent compared to Jackson's previous singles. There were no countdown show highlights, no heavy daytime rotation, no constant replay that defined earlier hits like Scream or Black or White. For viewers at home, the effect was confusing. The song was everywhere internationally. Fans who caught late-night airings of the prison version often assumed it had been pulled earlier, feeding the belief that MTV had stepped in forcefully. In reality, this was a form of soft restriction. And that decision had consequences, not just for the song's visibility, but for how its message landed with American audiences. And just when MTV thought the situation was contained, another controversy pushed the song even further into uncomfortable territory. The lyric controversy that changed everything. Just as MTV was already limiting the video's exposure, They Don't Care About Us became the center of an entirely different storm, one that had nothing to do with visuals. Michael Jackson responded quickly. On March 15, 1996, he released a public statement explaining that the words were never meant to target any group, but instead were used from the perspective of someone experiencing hate and discrimination. He described the song as the voice of the voiceless, insisting the language was meant to condemn prejudice, not promote it. Still, the damage was done, and networks like MTV were now under even more pressure. As a result, Jackson agreed to re-record and censor those specific lines for radio and television broadcasts. MTV adopted the edited version immediately. From that point on, viewers rarely heard the original lyrics on American television. Combined with the already restricted prison visuals, the song became fragmented, a powerful message split into pieces before it reached the public. This controversy also changed how the song was promoted. Radio stations became hesitant. Television outlets grew cautious. What was intended as a global protest anthem was now being discussed more for what it said than what it meant. And for MTV, already wary of the imagery, this gave them even more reason to keep the song at arm's length. But outside the United States, something very different was happening. While American networks hesitated, the rest of the world embraced the record. And that contrast would make MTV's handling of the song even more noticeable. A global hit the US barely saw. While They Don't Care About Us struggled to find full visibility on American television, the song was having a completely different life overseas. Throughout 1996, it exploded across Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia, topping charts in countries like Germany, Italy, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, and reaching the top 10 in more than a dozen others. In many regions, both music videos were aired more freely, including the prison version, which audiences immediately understood as a political statement rather than a provocation. In the United States, however, the story was far more muted. The single peaked at just number 30 on the Billboard Hot 100, a rare low point for a Michael Jackson release during the MTV era. Industry insiders later pointed to reduced television exposure as a major factor. By 1996 standards, a Jackson single without heavy MTV rotation was almost unthinkable. Yet, that's exactly what happened. This contrast made MTV's role impossible to ignore. Internationally, the song became an anthem for marginalized communities and protest movements. In America, it felt like a footnote. Fans who traveled abroad or watched foreign broadcasts noticed immediately that something didn't add up. Why was this song everywhere outside the US, but barely visible at home? Over time, that question turned into criticism. Many argued that MTV's cautious approach diluted the impact of one of Jackson's most important messages. Instead of sparking conversation, the song quietly slipped past mainstream American pop culture, and in doing so, it became a symbol of how political art could be softened, not by outright bans, but by selective exposure. Years later, as protest movements grew louder and more visible, people began revisiting the song with fresh eyes. And when they did, MTV's decision-making in 1996 suddenly looked less like moderation and more like avoidance, which brings us to the song's legacy and why its message feels even more relevant now than it did back then. The legacy MTV couldn't control. As the years passed, They Don't Care About Us refused to fade away. Instead, it slowly transformed into one of the most re-evaluated songs in Michael Jackson's entire catalog. By the 2000s, long after MTV's influence had declined, the track began resurfacing during moments of real-world unrest. Protesters referenced it, commentators quoted it, and a new generation, removed from the controversies of 1996, heard the message without the filters that once muted it. In 2010, the long sidelined prison version finally received an official wide release as part of Michael Jackson's Vision, a DVD box set celebrating his full videography. For many viewers, this was the first time they had ever seen the video in full. What once felt too intense for television now looked eerily prophetic. The imagery of police violence, mass incarceration, and civil unrest mirrored headlines rather than shocking them. That reassessment only deepened in 2020 when director Spike Lee released a new cut of the video. If this video helped you see this moment in music history differently, make sure to like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe if you want more deep dives into music stories that were misunderstood, restricted, or quietly reshaped behind the scenes. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't the ones that get banned, they're the ones that get buried.